Hello. As the EMCI is celebrating its jubilee, I should like to congratulate all the conference interpreter trainers and students involved in the European Masters over the years and present my view from the past of how the EMCI came into being, from the original pilot project to the signing of the agreement establishing the EMCI Consortium in 2001. The driving force behind the birth of the European Masters in Conference Interpreting was the progressive expansion of the European communities from the 6 original members of the Common Market to 28 member states of the European Union, until of course my own country left the EU after Brexit. In the 1950s and 60s, there were only 4 official languages. In January 1973, when the UK, Ireland and Denmark joined the EEC in the very first enlargement process, the number rose to 6 with Danish and English, and I started my career working for the European Parliament in Strasbourg. 21 years later, in 1995, with the help of conference interpreter trainers from the universities of Westminster and Paris, I found myself in charge of the training and recruitment of Finnish, Swedish and Norwegian interpreters for the European Parliament, just months before Finland and Sweden joined after holding a last-minute referendum, once the people of Norway voted to stay out. Following the fall of the Berlin Wall, preparations also began in the 1990s for the 5th enlargement, to include the countries of Central and Eastern Europe that had applied to join. The Commission's enlargement negotiators set up a Technical Assistance and Information Exchange Programme, TAIEX, and in 1997 it sponsored the University of Geneva to run a training course for interpreter trainers from applicant countries. That course was based on research applied to the teaching of interpretation, was held in Prague at Charles University. At the same time, the International Association of Conference Interpreters, AIC, ran similar courses through its Committee for Relations with Central and Eastern Europe. The European institutions have always been big recruiters of skilled conference interpreters. The Parliament depended mainly on recognised interpreter schools to train new freelancers and staff. However, the interpreting service of the Commission relied on its own internal training programme, the SCIC 6-month stage. You must bear in mind that there were already 11 official languages. But the EU Interpreting and Translation Services had to prepare to add a further 12 languages in parallel, because although it was generally assumed that there would be several separate waves of accession over time, even in 2001, no political decision had yet been taken about the specific dates for any of the applicant countries to join. This meant that we were dealing with twice the number of official working languages, and the number of combinations to be covered would rise dramatically from 110 to 506. Because of the sheer numbers involved, the SCIC in-house training scheme was no longer practicable, so in 1997 the Commission took a political decision to outsource interpreter training to national higher education systems. To meet the increasing demand for recruits qualified in the new conference languages, the Commission launched a pilot project with the European Language Council to develop a core curriculum for a new graduate course in conference interpreting. The initial project group involved members from 8 universities as well as the Parliament Interpretation Service. It was this project that gave birth to what was to become the EMCI Consortium, the partners pooling their resources and sharing best practices so as to ensure that the highest quality standards were maintained while training conference interpreters in far greater numbers. The common assessment criteria developed by the consortium also underpinned the joint accreditation tests of the EU interpreting services for the languages they needed in multilingual meetings. However, the critical mass of languages was now too great to be absorbed without a radical change in working methods. Although it was feasible for the Commission to modify its own interpreting regime, the European Parliament faced a different challenge, since the right of elected members to use their preferred official language lies at the heart of Parliament's democratic legitimacy. So every official language must be covered in the plenary sessions of Parliament, even if there is some room for flexibility in smaller meetings. The number of booths required has just increased from 4 in the 21st century to 24 today, and sometimes more for other languages too. Meanwhile, despite the increase in language combinations, the number of interpreters in each booth remained relatively stable thanks to a paradigm shift in European conference interpreting, leading to greater reliance on relay and so-called retour. The EMCI served as a catalyst for the new interpreting model, and trainers in the consortium were instrumental in defining new criteria for teaching simultaneous retour interpretation into a second language. So, by May 2004, the EMCI consortium partners working together to improve communication across frontiers enabled the EU institutions to function effectively following the historic Big Bang enlargement of the European Union with the accession of 10 new member states and the addition of 9 new official languages all at the same time. Back in May 2001, once the Common Core Curriculum had been developed, the senior representatives of the universities taking part in the project, including new members and observers, were invited to come to the European Parliament in Brussels to sign the consortium agreement. The project was jointly sponsored by the Commission and the Parliament, and the heads of all 3 interpreting services of the EU, including the Court of Justice, were present in the European Parliament building for the formal signing ceremony. This was followed by a round-table discussion with members of Parliament on The Power of Babel, Multilingualism at the European Parliament, held to mark the European Year of Languages. One of the panellists was the film star Sir Peter Ustinov, and you can see the European Parliament's video of him making wise and witty observations in a medley of languages, which is also included in this EMCI Anniversary Compendium. So thank you for your attention, and good luck with the new challenges facing the EMCI, such as online interpretation platforms and artificial intelligence.